So what about Candida? So Candida has gotten such a bad rep. I like to think of Candida as like teenagers. If the parents are home, they tend to behave. If the parents go away for the weekend, leaving them in an empty house, they're probably going to throw a party. No? Yeah. So Candida's kind of like that. So Candida and even some things like blastocystitis, sometimes it's not that we want to completely eradicate them. We just want them to be in the right balance and we want them to be behaving. It's when they become overgrown. So if you get a Candida overgrowth, that's when it becomes an issue. That makes sense? So if it's there, it's just like in a garden. So if you've got a nice healthy garden and you've got your flowers, you've got some ferns, you've got some trees, you've got some grass, if you've got all these nice healthy plants in there, the weeds don't really become an issue. If you neglect the garden and you don't give it nice healthy soil and you let some die, so then there's some spaces, that's when the weeds start to overgrow. But if you stay on top of it, so if you nourish your garden with healthy soil, give it some nutrients, give it some nice healthy water, the good plants are going to crowd out the bad. There might still be a few bad ones, but it won't be an issue. If you let the soil get very dry, if there's not any nutrients in the soil, then this is when the weeds can take over. Just like your digestive system. I always like to use an analogy. So if you've got a Candida overgrowth, you want to pay attention to that, bring it back down into balance. So it could be a combination of, I do find a combination of food and herbal antifungals are good. Whereas if you just do the Candida diet, it might help for a little bit, but it'll probably just come back when you start eating sugar. There's a really funny advert in Australia. I don't know if you've seen the Ethical Nutrients Inner Health Plus ad. So Inner Health Plus is a brand of probiotics. And they've got this advert where there's like a seesaw and there's all the bad bugs up here and then your good bugs are down here. So just like a seesaw, like you can get a little bit and then you can go like this, get a little bit, go like this. You need to knock the balance enough that the good bacteria are now dominant and then the bad bacteria are less. So you have this little balance. So say you're here and you've got this Candida overgrowth and you do the Candida diet, you might feel a bit better, but then it's still there. So then when you start eating sugar, it just comes back. So if you do the diet and at the same time doing some antifungals, like maybe certain strains of probiotics. So some antifungals could be thyme or oregano, and then Saccharomyces boulardii can be quite beneficial because that's a yeast-based probiotic which displaces Candida, which is also a yeast. So doing them together, and that can be enough with the diet to knock the difference. And then you've got that little bit of leeway where you can have some fruit, and you can have a bit of sugar, but it won't derail, sorry about that, all your progress. Yeah, so Candida, if it's in the large intestine, you just call it dysbiosis or Candida overgrowth. If we find it in the small intestine, it can be SIFO, small intestinal fungal overgrowth, which you can have at the same time as SIBO and LIBO, and everything can be out of balance. So it's so worth working with someone that knows what they're doing, because you'll just get better quicker. And you save yourself time, you save yourself money, like all the supplements that are in your cupboard, you can actually use them. You're worth it.